Do I have your permission
I
to
was trying to
record this
download.
class, please?
Of
Yes.
course, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Alrighty, welcome to our first class. And we're going to be getting into a consecutive lesson called Medical History. For your reference, it is on page 2-5 of your book. But before I get into that exercise, I just like to take a moment to talk to you about the mind of the raider. I'm going to be doing a little sharing of screens as I've done before, if I may. So it might take a few seconds to reflect that share screen function. There was a handout which maybe you've already looked at, which I am putting up here on the share screen. Now the handout is just a outline of what I'm going to be talking about. And as you know, the oral exam is graded by a person, a human being, which we call a rater. So it's important to know how the rater thinks, how their mind works, and what they consider important, what they're going to be grading you on, and what they're going to be listening in for, because as you know, the test, they record your renditions and obviously they later listen to them, maybe one or two raters, and then they give you your note. So without further ado, let's get into this about the mind of the rater. There are three big areas, which are important for a medical interpreting test and probably for any interpreting test. And the first area is that of accuracy. And when we speak of accuracy, it means that the interpreter, when interpreting into the target language, chooses an expression that fully conveys and best matches the meaning, and I'm underlining the word meaning, of the source language. Okay? So when we do that, we get an accurate rendition. The other area is that of language, and that means that you use an appropriate word structure to convey that meaning. And then I'll be talking to you about a third area, which is that of your delivery, meaning that you say what you are interpreting in a way that's appropriate for the receiver of that message. So let me get a little bit into each one of these areas. In regards to accuracy, we have, I'm going to be talking about these three things, which are the misinterpretations, the omissions, and additions. So the first thing I want to tell you in regards to these misinterpretations is that if we change the meaning of something we're interpreting, then that can become inaccurate, right? Sometimes this happens, the change in meaning. It could be because a person is just not proficient enough in both languages to do a good job interpreting. They don't quite understand English or Spanish or whatever language they are interpreting. An example of this might be somebody who is interpreting and hears the following. Your attorney just asked me to evaluate you. Your attorney just asked me to evaluate you. And I'm saying this sentence in the context of the meaning is this is all your attorney requires that I do. However, if the person interprets that as su abogado recién me preguntó que lo evaluara, those two words, just asked me, is interpreted incorrectly out of context because the just asked here is not recién me preguntó, like right now, but solo me pidió, solamente me pidió que lo evaluara. I'm not supposed to do anything else. So when something like this occurs, obviously the rendition of that, we've changed meaning and we've become inaccurate. At other times, we can be inaccurate because we might not know what a term means or not know how to interpret it. This happens a lot with, I've noticed a problem with, for example, the word dizzy. And I've had some people interpret because maybe it sounds similar or maybe because it also starts with a D. And so they interpret the question, are you dizzy, as se siente débil? And obviously the are you dizzy should be interpreted as se siente mareada or mareado, correct. So here, once again, is another example of how we have become, or whoever interprets in this fashion has become inaccurate. Other times we can become inaccurate when we run into these false friends or false cognates. And I'll give you an example. These false friends or false cognates are these words which are similar in how they're written, how they're pronounced in two languages, but do not necessarily mean the same. I'll give you first an example of a true cognate. Like if somebody says información, you say information, great, no problem. Both words are spelled almost the same, sound the same, mean the same. However, if somebody asks, what grades did you get in school? And this is something that psychiatrists ask when they're interviewing many times patients. And you interpret that as, ¿qué grados tenía en la escuela? There, and don't laugh because I was actually, this is from real life, I was actually next to an interpreter who was saying this to someone and I overheard it. So it's actually, ¿qué notas o qué calificaciones obtuvo usted en la escuela? O qué calificaciones le ponía su maestro, su profesor. Okay, so that's an example. The other one, which is the classical, where they teach everywhere, is embarrassed and embarazada.
Embarazada.
So they sound really similar and obviously mean differently. Sometimes they're easy to spot and detect, and other times not so easy. So these are things that the rater is listening in to see whether you fall into those traps. And continuing on with the issues with inaccuracy, we also become inaccurate when we leave things out. We become incomplete, obviously, when we omit something that was said and we forget to interpret. And somebody, I'll give you an example, might say, me duele la rodilla derecha y el talón izquierdo. And then the interpreter interprets, my right knee hurts, making no mention of the left heel. So this is another issue, which this is just a simple example, but sometimes you're interpreting things that are maybe a list of medications or a list of side effects that a medication might occur when patients taking a certain medication. And so sometimes it's a little trickier than that one. Another reason why we may become less accurate is when we add things that were not said. So for example, they might say, take these pills twice a day, and the interpreter becomes inaccurate by saying or interpreting, toma estas pastillas 2 veces al día con comidas.
Ah.
Now, there was no mention of with food. And there are some medications which actually need to be taken on an empty stomach to improve the absorption of the medication. And if you mix them with food, you might not be getting the full benefit of that medicine. So this is another thing to keep in mind. Now, I want to say to you that not all additions are wrong, in my opinion. Sometimes an addition is necessary in order to avoid a confusion.
Right.
Like, for example, you might be interpreting for, primary care or for gynecologist who is discussing contraceptive methods with a female patient and saying that she needs to use, if she's forgotten to take 2 or more pills, to please use foam. And foam, if we just interpret foam as espuma, in this context, this lady may think that she can just use shaving cream, right? So it might be best there to add and say, use espuma espermicida, because, it kills the sperm.
Right.
So there is an example where adding that word clarifies things and is not a problem. That's why I want to tell you or show you the difference between that first example about taking something with food and this one about just making sure that the foam is not later going to be some foam for shaving, and so we're going to wind up with a pregnant lady. So, as I was saying, misinterpretations, changes in meaning, omissions, and any unnecessary additions will affect your accuracy, and they're all going to lead to you losing points on an exam. Okay, so these, I want you to please, if there's only one thing you remember of all I'm telling you today, is that the reason why most people who obviously speak both languages well don't do well on the exam is because they change meaning and they forget things. Those are the 2 pecados capitales. Okay.
I feel like I've committed all of those crimes.
Oh, yes.
I really do.
We should all be in jail. But we have to try to, we're all human and our memory has obviously a limit, but we have to try to reduce this to the minimum possible for our exam and for real life, is so that the benefit of a complete communication is being received by the other party, right? And it is difficult. It is difficult to be complete and to not forget things. So that's something to be mindful of. I want to now go into the language part of what I want to talk to you about. And in regards to language, they will be listening in to see how good your grammar is. Things like verbs, prepositions, proper use of pronouns, right? And I'll give you a few examples. I have heard many Spanish speakers misuse the verb haber, H-A-B-E-R. And you may get somebody wanting to interpret, I hope, the phrase, I hope you liked the hospital food, as espero que le haya, H-A-I-G-A, que le haya gustado la comida del hospital. There you automatically going to lose points because this would be H-A-Y-A. Espero que le haya gustado la comida del hospital. Issues with some common prepositions, which there is absolutely no problem in real life with these things, but for a test, like if they say the patient is, in English, under, that's the preposition under observation, this should not be que el paciente está bajo observación. It should be que el paciente está en observación. Another example with this word preposition under, if they say it will be done under anesthesia, it's not really que se hace bajo anestesia, sino que se hace con anestesia. La operación se hace con anestesia. Okay? And sometimes some prepositions are best to do a Houdini disappearing act on them because sometimes they're not really necessary. I'll give you an example. If somebody says, we need to wait for, and the preposition is for the afterbirth, this to Spanish is not really que hay que esperar por, the afterbirth is la placenta. We can just get rid of por, and we say, hay que esperar la placenta, a secas. The other, I'll give you another example, like we're waiting for the bus. In Spanish, we would probably say, estamos esperando el autobús. We wouldn't say, estamos esperando por el autobús. Okay? So these are a couple of things I want to let you know about these prepositions. The other one I'd like to mention to you are the possessive pronouns, like in Spanish, mi, tú, su, mi casa, tu tía, su esposa, you know. Now, when are these really, they may be redundant. I'll give you an example. If somebody says in English, because they're used in English, somebody says, the question is, does your head hurt? Actually, we shouldn't say, le duele su cabeza, because the only head that can hurt is the patient's own head. He can't have a headache that doesn't belong to him. That is, you know, if his finger hurts, only his finger, he can only feel pain. So when it's parts of the body in a question, this should actually be, le duele la cabeza, le duele el dedo, le duele la mano. So this is a difference from how English is spoken and how Spanish is spoken. It is widely spoken this way in the Spanish of the United States. I hear it all the time, and I believe it's just a mix of languages, and, you know, English just, how can I say, is the dominant language. So there is a coming of the language into the syntax and structures, and that's okay for real life. But for your exam, you should try to be careful with that detail. When a question is being asked about a body part to the patient, va a ser la cabeza, la mano, la espalda, el hombro, no tu cabeza, tu dedo, tu espalda, because we already know that it is theirs. It can't be anybody else's. Doesn't mean that you don't use possessive pronouns, because you might have the father bringing in his son, and so the question to the father might be, ¿qué problema tiene su hijo? And you have to use the possessive because we are talking about this child which belongs to this parent, right? But when the question is to the patient directly about a part of their body, we would just use neutral pronouns, not the possessive ones. Just do the best you can with those. All of these type of issues can lead to you losing some points on your exam. They're not as much of a capital sin as forgetting entire symptoms or, you know, changing meaning, but these are details that you should try to keep in mind when you are practicing and trying to improve your interpretation for an exam. Any flaws in grammar that I notice during the class, I will try and let you know, but I do have to let you know that I am not an English or Spanish teacher, and I don't know, I don't teach that during the course. I teach interpretation, so if at any point we notice any of these issues, all I can suggest for you is that you take some conversational, maybe Spanish classes or English classes, depending on which of those languages you might have the issue in. But all the same, I will try and guide you if I notice something, but it is out of the scope of this course to teach verbs, prepositions, pronouns. But I do have to mention them because they do look at that. Another thing within language is what goes under style, and under style we have things like idioms and syntax. And I'll give you an example of an idiom. There are many of them, but somebody might say in English that this is a piece of cake, meaning that this is easy. And in Spanish, we would not say que esto es un pedazo de pastel o de torta. We would say que esto es pan comido. It means the same, that it's easy, es pan comido. So if you know the idiom in the other language, I'm not saying that there's an equivalent idiom for every expression, and if you didn't know the idiom, you would at least piece of cake interpret as esto fácil. Right?
That's what I would have done, because I didn't know that pan comido.
Pan comido tampoco, yeah.
Yeah. But if you know an idiom in the other language, then you can use it, and that would be the best. But you know, as long as I just don't want you to freak out on your exam. Oh, I don't know every idiom, because you never will. But as long as you can, I don't know if I know the idiom, great. But if I don't, I'll at least try to interpret the meaning of that. The other thing to keep in mind is the order of the words, the syntax. And at times, one that I hear a lot, somebody has high blood pressure, and I hear the words in the same order in Spanish, que tienen alta presión, but in Spanish it is actually que tienen la presión alta, in this order. First the noun, which is presión, and then the modifier or adjective, que es alta. It could be baja, right? If you have red spots on the skin, you have to turn it around once again and say, tengo manchas rojas, no rojas manchas. The same way you wouldn't say, in regards to the White House, you wouldn't say that the president está en la blanca casa. You say que está en la casa blanca. That doesn't mean that that is 100% that way, because I can definitely, at times, when I want to put more emphasis on maybe the adjective, and you generally would say un dolor fuerte, but you could also say, if you want to put more emphasis on how bad the pain is, que tiene un fuerte dolor, okay? But these are a few exceptions. Generally, you're going to put your noun first and then the adjective. In regards to the vocabulary, it's what we're going to be covering in class, and that is the medical lingo, knowing the medical words, body parts, signs, symptoms. And by the way, can somebody tell me the difference between a sign and a symptom?
Could a sign be a visual appearance, or I'm not sure?
Síntoma.
What do you think, David?
Síntoma y...
Signo y síntomas. ¿Cuál es la diferencia? Porque alguna diferencia debe haber. Si no, serían o todos signos o todos síntomas.
Síntoma tiene que ver más con algo eh, hmm, más crucial, algún síntoma más grave.
Okay, I'll give you a clue. Pain is a symptom. Jaundice is a sign.
Sign. See, it's visual, right? Or is it?
Ah,
Correct.
no.
Correct. It means that one is, and it's easier for me to explain it in Spanish. El síntoma es subjetivo. In other words, if the person doesn't tell me they have pain, well, maybe they have a grimace on their face, but I can't really know. But if the patient comes to see me and he's yellow, then he doesn't have to tell me he's yellow. I can see it. Es objetivo.
I see.
Es objetivo. Okay. This is just una curiosidad que les comento. For example, fever can be both a sign and a symptom because the patient can tell you, I feel hot, and probably has fever, right? And at the same time, because we have thermometers, I can measure it, and that's when it becomes a sign. Okay? I can now say, usted tiene 103 degrees, or 39 grados, or whatever. So that is the difference.
But could you also have a sign say, because if somebody comes in and they're flushed and they say they have a fever, could that be a sign also or not?
The flushing of the skin
Yes.
is also a sign.
Okay.
It could be because of fever. It could be an allergic reaction.
Right.
There could be different causes. But
okay.
It is correct what you've said. What I am able to observe, it would be a sign, and what I can't observe would be the symptom. It's what the patient tells me. If the patient has nausea, that's a symptom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'd also like to mention to you, obviously, the pronunciation is important during these exams. Some people, and they mispronounce words, and that could lead to a misunderstanding. And I'll give you an example a little later on. The register of the language is something they also expect you to know. And when I say register, I'm talking about the level of how formal that language is. In other words, we have a general register, which are the words we don't look up in a dictionary because everybody knows them, like table, mesa. High register, which is the medical lingo. That's why there's medical dictionaries for it. And then we also have the low register, which are the colloquial expressions and slang, like greñas, right? Si me tomo una, ¿cómo era que decían los mexicanos la cerveza? A ver, era...
La chela.
Una chelita. So, well, there are certain words or that are used by certain groups of people, and not everybody knows that lingo. So, and that would enter the slang and colloquial expressions in the lower register. So, I'll give you an example. Like, if you hear the word panza or barriga, this should be interpreted to English as belly and not abdomen, because abdomen would be the higher register, more medical word, right? They both mean the same part of the body, but different register. If you're interpreting and they say the word hypertension, you would need to interpret as hipertensión, the higher register of the obviously it's the same as saying high blood pressure, but it's a medical term. Last but not least, here in language, in regards to the localization, which means the way they speak Spanish in certain countries, these national certification exams for medical interpretation are not localized to a specific country. So as long as you don't make up a word, you can use words from different countries and they will be accepted. It's not like you have to use Mexicanism or you have to use Central Americanism or whatever. It's just because no localization is expected, just general Spanish will do. There's not going to be a problem with that. I'd like to get into just mentioning the delivery. So this is referring to the process of relaying the message, how you sound while you're doing it. What they like is for you to sound smooth. In other words, when you're interpreting, that you won't be like or going back and starting again, when it sounds choppy, or when going back and starting again is backtracking. These are things that we because we need to try and sound confident. We need to make sense. We need to be coherent. So the message needs to make sense. And if it is not a question and ended with a period, it should sound like a statement and not a question. I have gotten students who would end with a, like it sounds like a question mark. And that really tells me they're not sure about what they're interpreting. And so al raider se le ponen los pelos de punta when they hear this. So be very careful with your tone of voice, which should sound pleasant, your enunciation of the words. Avoid saying at the start of everything you can interpret. That they don't like that. And in regards to the pacing, you should be interpreting at a steady, moderate pace. What do I mean by that? Moderate means not too fast and not too slow. And steady means that there shouldn't be parts where you went slower and other parts like when you sped up to catch up, right? So just overall same speed and all of it just at the same speed. That's basically, and not too fast, not too slow. Okay. The last thing I want to leave you, because you're going to be studying and there's a lot to get into with this, but I would like to suggest that when you are coming to class and you find a word that you're struggling with, and write that word down and write the translation of the word down. And always ask yourself if, when you're interpreting, not necessarily during class, but when you're interpreting, was I able to convey the basic meaning of this message? Did I forget things? And that's why I also recommend that you record yourself when you're practicing, so you can go back and listen, see if you left things out. Did you add things, or did you change the meaning? Did you use good grammar? Was the register the appropriate register? Did you interpret at that good pace, not too fast, not too slow? Were you pronouncing your words clearly and correctly? And then also be a little more critical and say, does my voice sound nervous? Do I sound hesitant or insecure? Because that is a quality that you will transmit in a recording. And here in class, it doesn't matter. We're here to learn, make mistakes. But for your exam, you need to get to that point where you own it. Fake it till you make it, like they say, And you should, at the very end of these questions, ask yourself, what can I do differently next time to improve my rendition? And, bottom line, what I'm saying is set goals to try to, say, I'm having a problem with this word, or I'm having a problem with asking these types of questions. So make a goal to study these areas where you're noticing that you're getting snagged, you're not being able to flow smoothly, so that you can get to the point where you sound good and you sound smooth. Okay? This takes time and practice, but with practice and practice and practice, but not blind practice. Practice saying, okay, I know I have a problem here, so I'm working on this. Okay, I got past this issue. We're going to the next one. So that way you're progressing all the time. ¿Alguna pregunta?
No.
No.
Terry? Ninguna?
Ninguna.
Okay. One last thing I want to share with you. I have an actual test results report of a person who did not pass their exam. And I'd like to read it to you so that you can hear what the feedback and recommendations were. And you'll see that it is exactly what I've just described here. Please listen.
Okay.
The test candidate was able to deliver her renditions at a solid pace. She demonstrated solid Spanish language skills. However, she had pronunciation, grammar, and syntax issues in English throughout the exam. For example, she pronounced death as diet. So there, I had told you earlier that I'd show you these examples of mispronunciations and how they can hurt you. The word started as starter, and I heard as I hurt, among many others. Her English language skills made it difficult to understand her renditions at times. She also had major omissions of entire phrases, which led to significant errors. For instance, when the provider specifically shared a phone number, she failed to give the number. Recommendations. It is recommended that the candidate continue to increase her knowledge of medical terminology in both languages. It is also very important for her to work on further developing her English grammar and pronunciation to avoid misunderstandings. It would also be beneficial for the candidate to improve her note-taking and memory skills. So, that's just food for thought.
Thank you.
De nada.
Thank you.
So, if there aren't any questions, and without further ado, we can jump into our first consecutive exercise.
Okay.
All right, let's do it. Así me gusta. What I'm going to be doing is I'll be saying your name so there's no confusions. I'll say your name and then I'll read something to you. And I'll just ask that you do your best to interpret it to the target language. If there's any recommendations once you're finished, I'll let you know, and then we'll go keep going forward and taking turns. See?
Listo.
Okay. I'm going to be starting with Terry.
Okay. Now you're going to say, oh my God, how did she ever get to be an interpreter?
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mrs. Bonilla. I'm going to ask you a few questions about your medical history before the doctor examines you, all right?
Buenas tardes, señora Bonilla. Le voy a estar haciendo unas cuantas preguntas acerca de sus antecedentes médicos antes de que el doctor le examine. ¿Está bien?
Muy bien.
Okay, muy bien. And David, sí, señorita, está bien.
Yes, ma'am. It's very good. That's good.
Okay. Now, because I cannot see the lady, I would recommend to you, señorita, to interpret as miss, and if it had been señora, to interpret as ma'am.
Okay.
Did I say yes, ma'am, or did I say yes, girl?
I think I heard you say yes, miss.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly what you said, but I think it was.
I couldn't remember either.
I know you get nervous.
Señorita, I would interpret as miss, and señora as ma'am.
Okay.
And another one for you then, Terry.
Yes.
First of all, what is the reason for your visit today?
Bueno, en primer lugar, ¿cuál es la razón de su visita hoy?
Okay. I would like to suggest that the word visit, that you interpret it as consulta.
Okay.
And David, pues mi abogado me dijo que viniera con este doctor porque me accidenté en el trabajo y me mandó a que este doctor me examinara.
Well, my lawyer brought me to this doctor after my accident and asked me to have the doctor check me out, evaluate me.
Okay. We would need to add there, because it's accidente de trabajo, what would you have said? You just said accident.
An accident on the job.
Okay, that's fine. And Terry, how did you injure yourself?
¿Cómo es que usted se lastimó?
Okay. And David, estaba sorteando zanahorias en la línea. Trabajo en una canería y cuando estiré la mano así, de repente sentí un tirón, ¡zas! Y luego no podía usar la mano.
I was sorting corn, zanahoria. I was sorting carrots, and when something happened and I had an accident.
Okay.
I missed
I
quite a
think
bit.
we left a couple of things.
Yeah.
Would you like to repeat?
Dígamelo otra vez, por favor.
Claro. Estaba sorteando zanahorias en la línea. Trabajo en una canería. Y cuando estiré la mano así, de repente sentí un tirón, ¡zas! Y luego no podía usar la mano.
I was sorting carrots. I work in a canadería, no sé cómo decirlo. I felt a pain in my hand, and then I couldn't lift it.
Okay. There, they clarify that it was en la línea, on the line, like on a production line, right?
I see.
The canería would be un anglicismo, no? Like Spanglish for a cannery. And what I want to draw your attention to is the word mano. On your exam, if you get mano, you interpret hand, but please, please know that a great deal of people use the word mano as if it meant arm. There is a clear distinction in English that mano is only hand, so that means from your wrist downwards. And in real life, many times we will need to clarify with the patient their use of the word mano as their use of the word pie, which many times is used for any part of the leg. Me duele el pie, and then you find out, you interpret foot, and then the doctor finds out that there's a sore knee and says, I thought you said foot. So, yeah. And so it said, it would be, and when I stretched my arm out like this, all of a sudden I felt a pull, boom, and I couldn't use my arm, or I couldn't move my arm.
I see.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes.
So, but should you say hand in the beginning just in case and not suppose that it's the arm, or should you just go ahead and make the linguistic decision, as it were, that the person is talking about their arm based on the context?
Good question.
If I have enough context, I may be able to know what they mean. If I don't want to interrupt the flow, I can just say my hand/arm and let the provider inquire exactly what part they're.
Okay, great.
Yeah. But I tell you, 90% of the times in my experience, I get, especially people from Mexico, using the word mano, and 90% of the times it means some part of the arm that is not the hand.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Also, and I don't blame them, because when you're looking at a soccer match and the ball falls on the player's shoulder, they say, el árbitro cobró mano. And it didn't touch the hand, it touched the shoulder. So
Oh my
it's,
gosh.
it's a common, problem for us who deal with, accuracy and linguistic expressions, makes it hard. Vamos a seguir entonces.
Mhm.
And Terry,
Mhm.
had you ever had this problem before?
¿Había usted tenido ese problema anteriormente en
Great,
alguna ocasión?
great. And David, no exactamente, no. Es que trabajábamos muchas horas en ese rato, hasta 10 o 12 horas en un solo turno, y estaba cansadísima.
Not exactly, no. We've worked a lot, from 10 to 12 hours. And I was extremely tired.
Okay. You might want to add there 10 to 12 hours per shift en un solo turno.
En un solo turno, yes.
Yes. And Terry, do you work standing at a conveyor belt?
¿Trabaja usted parada en una faja transportadora?
Okay.
Mm.
I would use the word cinta transportadora.
Oh, okay. You'd use what?
Cinta
Transportadora. Okay, sounds good.
You will hear another way of saying it, which I hear from our friends in Mexico. They say, trabajo en una banda.
I've heard that before too, and when I was studying the lesson, I think I said banda when I was interpreting to myself.
Okay.
But cinta transportadora,
Transportadora.
ha dicho. Okay.
Okay. And the answer was C, yes. And I'll do the hard part. I'll interpret that for you. And David, and do you have to do a lot of reaching?
Usted tiene que hacer mucho estirando el brazo para levantar cosas.
Okay. Let's maybe not add the levantar cosas because it's not there. When you,
Okay.
the reaching, that we have that word in English and people understand clearly what that means, but we don't have a word that clearly expresses that as well in Spanish. So I had talked to you about certain additions, which is what you're doing, and I feel is fine here. Porque yo me puedo estirar poniéndome en puntas de pie, and that's not what they're asking. So you would have to there say, tiene que estirar mucho los brazos o hacer muchos estiramientos de brazos. Something along these lines.
Okay. Para...
For the reaching.
Okay.
Okay. And Terry, sí, y no nos dejan descansar cuando deben hacerlo. Solo nos dan un descanso a las 12 del día por 15 minutos. Y creo que eso es ilegal.
Yes, and they don't allow us to take breaks when we should. They don't allow us to rest. They only give us a break of 15 minutes at 12 o'clock, and I think that's illegal.
Okay.
I might have left something out.
No. You did great. The only mini improvement, but very mini, maybe for 12 o'clock, 12 noon.
Okay.
Maybe.
Sure.
Mediodía.
Mediodía. And David, now I'm going to ask you some questions about your family. Does anyone in your family have heart disease?
Ahora le voy a hacer unas preguntas de su familia. ¿Alguna persona en su familia tiene enfermedad cardíaco?
Okay. We would end that with an A, enfermedad cardíaca, porque es la enfermedad.
Ay, sí.
Okay. And Terry, no, que yo sepa no.
No, not that I know of.
And David, how about diabetes?
¿Y qué tal del diabetes?
Okay. I would like to suggest to you, when they're getting into a list, they ask about heart disease, and then they say, how about? This how about just interpret as an E.
Y,
There's not really y qué tal de
okay,
ahí
so
al
there's just
español.
y diabetes.
Correct.
I
¿Y
see.
diabetes?
Okay.
Like another question, right? And Terry, no, salvo mi abuelita, pero ya murió hace años.
No, except for my grandmother, but she died years ago.
Okay. And David, has anyone in your family suffered from cancer?
¿Alguien en su familia ha sufrido de cáncer?
Okay. I would like to suggest for the suffered in English to interpret as padecido o tenido cáncer.
Okay, padecido.
Okay. Cáncer es una enfermedad crónica y generalmente hay algunos que la gente se muere más rápido, algunos que se curan, pero hay mucha gente que lo tiene bastante tiempo. ¿Dónde podríamos usar o acostumbramos a usar sufrido? Si bien digamos que en el lenguaje común la gente acostumbra a decir eso, que sufre de diabetes, pero usaríamos sufre cuando es algo repentino. Sufrió un derrame cerebral. Even driving, sufrió un accidente en la carretera mientras iba manejando. Okay, sufrió un ataque al corazón.
El corazón.
We can't say que padece un ataque al
No.
corazón because it's just something that happens really quick. So I would use the verb sufrió for things that occur suddenly y padecer o tener una enfermedad for those that you have for a long time.
Okay, crónica.
Yeah. And Terry, no, gracias a Dios, no.
No, thank God.
Okay. And David, have you ever had any infectious disease such as typhoid, cholera, or diphtheria?
¿Usted ha tenido una enfermedad infectuosa como tifoid, cólera o difteria?
Okay. I don't know if you're able to see what I'm showing you on the screen here.
Hola.
Okay, you're able to see it. It's a digital chalkboard I have. I'm going to erase that word hola. It was there from before, just because I want to go over something here. We're going to clear this. And when you're going to have some questions that have the adverb ever in them. Here's one, have you ever? So this is what you have to pay attention to about the word ever. Let me see if I can get this going here. So the adverb is ever. Okay, ever. And the ever here plus comes with an auxiliary verb, which is have. Because you'll find it, do you ever, have you ever, did you ever? Okay, but here it's with have, the question, have you ever? Okay. In these cases, the have and the ever are coming together. I would interpret this as alguna vez. And the have, just remember the first two letters in that one. Ha tenido. Okay, for the had. Alguna vez ha tenido. O sea, el verbo como terminado en I de puntito, D-O. This is just like a simple type of formula to try and help you remember it. Alguna vez, the have, pasa acá, las primeras dos letras del word have, ha tenido una enfermedad infecciosa. You said infectuosa, es infecciosa, double C, infecciosa, tal como. Typhoid is fiebre tifoidea. We're going to see it at the end because it's in your vocabulary list. Fiebre tifoidea, cólera o difteria.
Difteria.
Okay. All right.
Difteria, you said? Difteria.
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 Con H, ¿verdad? Difteria, como en inglés, ¿verdad?
Con F.
En español no tiene H, en inglés sí.
Con D-I-F, ¿sí?
Sí, sí, sí.
Ok, muy bien. Gracias.
Okay. So, Terry, que sepa yo, no, siempre he gozado de buena salud.
Not that I know of. I've always enjoyed good health.
Very good. And David, have you been vaccinated against tetanus, measles, and smallpox?
Le han dado vacunas contra...
I didn't hear the beginning.
¿Has tenido vacunas contra, yo no sé cómo decir, tetanus, difteria? Ay, no dijiste difteria, pero
Okay.
que
Have you been vaccinated against tetanus, measles, and smallpox?
Uy, yo no sé esas palabras. ¿Has tenido vacunas contra los measles? Uy, esas son unas de las palabras, ¿cierto? Measles.
Okay, okay. Hay que estudiar esta terminología, no problem.
Sí.
So here you would say, and remember, us as interpreters, you have a, or you're asking as. As is el tuteo.
Sí.
But you don't use this. I encourage you not to use this, el tuteo, when you're working. It's really unprofessional, and it shows lack of respect towards your patients. That is good to use with your family, your friends, maybe with a child, yes, if you're interpreting for a child, but for adult patients, to be more professional, it will be siempre el usted. So, with have you been, ha sido, because it's ser o estar, the verb be, been comes from to be, and be can be ser, or it can also be interpreted as estar. Here no es estar, es ser vacunado contra algo. Entonces, ha sido vacunado contra el tétanos, sarampión for measles,
sarampión,
y viruela, smallpox. Now, there's a way to remember sarampión, and the way you're going to remember it, sarampión, you're going to remember this. You're going to remember Sarah had measles. You're going to remember a little girl called Sarah, and that she had measles. And that's when you remember, you go back to Sarah, sarampión. Okay? Sarampión.
I always had varicella and viruela mixed up.
Yes, I have one for that one too. And
varicela qué?
And viruela.
Yeah. Varicella is chickenpox.
Right.
And I will send you, one of my students developed a little picture about a chicken, and she said, la gallina Mariela tuvo varicela, something like that. I don't remember. And it's a picture of a chicken. So you remember chicken pox, and the chicken has a name on it.
María, ¿cómo era? What did you say? What did you say it was?
Yeah.
Rhyme?
No. The rhyme was, I can't remember the exact rhyme. That's
Right.
why I'll give it
That's
to you
okay.
later, but it's something like saying, La gallina Mariela tuvo varicela. So it
Okay,
sort of ends
gracias.
like
Yeah,
that. So
that worked. That's
you see
great.
the chicken
That
and
Yes,
is
the
great.
name of the chicken and you remember.
great. That's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. I'll share that with you. But let's keep the ball rolling.
Right.
So Terry, creo que sí, pero no estoy segura. Cuando era niña vivíamos en un rancho y era muy difícil conseguir atención médica, pero pero creo que me vacuné contra todas esas enfermedades. Mi papá insistía en eso.
Just one moment.
I forgot it too.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm looking at what I wrote. I believe so because when I was young, we lived on a ranch and it was very difficult to get medical attention. But I think I was vaccinated against all of those illnesses because my father insisted upon it.
Impresionante.
Did I leave anything out? I might have.
No, you didn't leave. You didn't really. I'm. Once again, a mini improvement might be instead of saying when I was a child.
Yeah,
Cuando era
when I was
niña.
a child. Sure, yeah.
But
Cuando era
yeah,
niña. Cuando era
it's about
niña.
the same.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay, close enough. Very good.
for government work. Right.
And David, did you have any common childhood illnesses such as chickenpox or mumps?
Usted tuvo unas enfermedades de la juventud como un paso.
I'm sorry, you cut out a little. Could you say that one more time?
Usted, usted tuvo cuando era niña enfermedades como chickenpox, no sé cómo decir.
Okay. Varicela. And mumps is paperas.
Varicela.
Chickenpox, varicela. Mumps, paperas.
Paperas.
Yeah.
Es paperas.
Yeah.
Es paperas.
Okay. And Terry, sí, recuerdo que tuve paperas y también sarampión. ¿Será que no me prendió la vacuna o no sé?
Yes, I remember that I had mumps and also measles. It could be that the vaccine didn't take. I don't know.
Okay. And David, have you ever had any operations?
¿Usted ha tenido algunas operaciones?
Okay. Let's go back to what we saw a little earlier about how the have and the ever. Right? Alguna vez and in this case we would have to say alguna vez has sido operado.
Ha sido operado.
Another way of saying it, because it doesn't have to be 100% that way. I'm guiding you. I've also seen this a little simpler as alguna vez le operaron. Okay, that's another possibility that's going to work. Alguna vez le operaron o alguna vez ha sido operado.
Okay.
Okay. And Terry, sí, en el 85 me sacaron la matriz y también el apéndice hace unos 10 años.
Yes, in 85, my uterus was removed and my appendix was taken out about 10 years ago.
Okay. And David, I take it you were hospitalized for those operations?
Em, ¿Usted fue hospitalizada para esas operaciones?
Sí, Terry, sí, estuve internada una semana por lo de la matriz y no me acuerdo cuánto tiempo por el apéndice.
Yes, I was hospitalized for about a week for the uterus, and I don't remember for how long with the appendix.
Okay, great. David, do you have any allergies to any food or drug?
¿Usted tiene algunas alergias a una comida o droga?
Okay. I would like to suggest that you ask this question differently. The way you should ask this is, ¿usted es alérgica a
Esa-
algún
esa alérgica.
alimento o medicamento? We're not going to
Medicamento.
say droga because this
Yeah.
could lead to a misunderstanding. And it's not really
Okay.
because in English and in Spanish, there's another thinking of drugs, drogas, like, you know, si bien hay personas que usan la palabra droga como sinónimo de medicamento, for an exam, I would not interpret drug unless they're talking about cocaine or stuff like that as droga. I would say medicamento.
Medicamento.
Okay. And Terry, no, que yo sepa, no.
No, not that I'm aware of, not that I know of.
Okay. And David, do you suffer from headaches?
¿Usted sufre de dolor de cabeza? ¿Dolores
Now,
de cabeza?
we had said that headache's like a chronic thing. What other word would we use for suffer?
¿Usted padece de dolor de cabeza?
Okay. And Terry, no, nada fuera de lo común. Usted sabe, de vez en cuando vuelvo del trabajo muy cansada, me duele la cabeza, pero no padezco de jaquecas ni nada de eso.
Well, nothing out of the ordinary. Once in a while, when I get home from work and I'm really tired, my head hurts, but I don't have any kinds of like migraines or anything like that, or strong headaches.
Very good. And David, do you have any trouble with your throat, a persistent cough or sore throat?
¿Usted tiene problemas con la garganta, una tos persistente o de la garganta? ¿Problemas de la garganta?
¿O dolor de garganta?
¿Dolor de garganta? Sí.
Okay.
Dolor de garganta.
Terry,
Yes.
no, nada de eso.
No, none of that, or nothing like that.
Another one for you, Terry.
Okay.
For Terry, okay. When was the last time you had a chest x-ray?
¿Cuándo fue la última vez que usted había tenido un rayo X del pecho, o sea, una radiografía del pecho?
Okay. Now, I would like to suggest to you, when you're talking about tests, because the tests are done to us by other people,
Right.
you know, the tech comes and does that. Instead of saying que usted ha tenido, because I can't really have it.
No.
Puedo tener una casa, puedo tener un perro.
Sí, sí.
I would say a usted, ¿cuándo fue la última vez que le hicieron?
Hicieron, ok,
And
radiografías del pecho.
better yet, una radiografía de tórax. This is a
Okay.
medical term for that.
All right.
Okay. And David, el año pasado en el trabajo nos obligaron a someternos a un chequeo y me sacaron radiografías.
Last year on the job, we were obligated to take out to take X-rays, and they took us out of the job.
Let me repeat. There was some changes in meaning there. Listen carefully, please.
Okay.
El año pasado, en el trabajo, nos obligaron a someternos a un chequeo y me sacaron radiografías.
Last year, they took us on the job. They made us check in. They made us get a checkout, and they had us take X-rays.
Okay. I want you to look a second here at the board. So we could say LY last year. The letter L is a good letter for work. L, laburo. Laboro. Last year at L, work. And you put a check mark, un chequeo. And RX, X-rays could be. Or, I'm sorry, or just, whatever you like, because RX could also be prescription. Let's not use RX. Let's use XR, right? So you could say, last year at work, they obligated us, or they required that you have your check, get a checkup, and they took X-rays. Okay, so with 4 things here, you can get the most important, like little 4 units here that you jump from. Last year, LY, the L del laboro, checkup, XR, X-ray. This is what will help you develop the memory and retention skills that you need for these tests, and will make your life so much simpler as an interpreter. Okay? And Terry, have you had any heart palpitations, chest pain, shortness of breath?
¿Le ha palpitado el corazón? ¿Ha tenido dolor del pecho, o sea, del tórax? ¿O le ha costado respirar? ¿Ha tenido problemas con la respiración?
Okay. I would like to suggest to you for heart palpitations to simplify to palpitaciones.
Okay.
Chest, we will say tórax when talking about this test, but otherwise we will say
pecho.
Pecho.
Okay, very good.
Shortness of breath, maybe falta de aire.
Okay.
And David, no, nada de eso por fortuna, solo el dolor de la mano. And here's the context that lets you know that it wasn't the hand. He says, aquí en el codo y en la canilla, y me corre hasta los dedos.
No, nothing like that, fortunately. Just here in my elbow, and it goes up my arm.
Okay. Now, here you have solo el dolor de la mano, just the pain in the, which is actually, I would interpret in this context, arm. And then I signal out what part of the arm. I say, here in the elbow, canilla, I would interpret as forearm in this context.
Okay, that was what I was wondering.
Yeah.
In other countries, it is also like in Argentina down south, la canilla is the shin.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, but in this
context, all the way to the toes,
yeah, in this context, it's being used as forearm, and logically, it's going from the elbow through the forearm and then reaching the fingers. So it makes sense. Y me corre hasta los dedos, and it runs to my fingers. This is something in medicine called an epicondylitis. Condylitis, which is the part of the elbow that a lot of people who play tennis also have that. It's called tennis elbow.
Isn't that you like the pointy part of your elbow?
It is the pointy part, but going outwards towards not towards the body, but towards the other side of the elbow. It's right there because all the tendons are attached to that part of the bone, and they go then into the forearm and through the fingers and make the fingers bend. And the person who works sorting carrots is just grabbing and grabbing and grabbing and grabbing all day, and that's why that happens. It causes inflammation. It's actually a type of tendonitis.
Right.
So, Terry, okay, that's all the questions I have. Just slip on a gown and get up on the examining table. The doctor will be right with you.
Ok, son todas las preguntas que tengo. Súbase, póngase un camisón, por favor, y súbase a la mesa. I don't know how to say examining table. Y el doctor le va a atender después de poco.
Y la bata.
Y la bata, sí. Y la bata. Se me olvidó. La bata.
Examining table you could interpret as camilla, or a little more formal, mesa de exploraciones.
Okay. Mesa de exploraciones o camilla. Muy bien.
Yes.
Y la bata.
y la bata. Yes. Okay. Let's go over the terminology that appeared in this lesson. So, the medical history, David, is...
Los antecedentes médicos.
Yes,
los antecedentes
médicos. In real life, you will hear the word historial médico, and that's fine. But medical books have this word. This is the proper medical translation of that, antecedentes. And what's antes is what happened before, right? So it's my history. It happened before I got here. Antecedentes médicos.
They use the same thing in the criminal terminologies. Antecedentes.
Exacto.
Condenas.
Penales.
Penales, sí.
Yeah. And Terry, the verb to examine.
Examinar.
Okay. Could also be revisar.
Explorar,
is another
revisar.
one. Okay. And David, visit.
Consulta.
And Terry, the verb to injure, like to injure oneself.
Well, I've heard lastimar or lesionar.
Both are correct.
Okay.
And David, if you're working en la línea, que es una línea de producción o ensamblado, you're
on the production line.
Okay. A conveyor belt, Terry, is...
Let's see, la cinta transportadora.
Okay. And we'll remember once como mexicanismo, escucho mucho banda.
La banda.
Yeah, trabajó en una banda. And this verb reaching, David?
Sí, extender los brazos así mismo.
Okay. I want to explain something because you have the word to extend and to flex, right? So if you are looking at your arm right now and you have an elbow, the elbow will divide the arm in two segments. Distal to the elbow, you have the forearm, the wrist, and the hand, and you have the upper arm and shoulder, right? So if my forearm and hand come closer to the upper arm and shoulder, that's when I am flexing. Flexion makes that two segments come closer together. And the opposite is extension, when two segments are farther. When you extend your arm, the hand is actually farther from the shoulder than it was when you were flexing it. You flex it to touch your shoulder. See? Okay.
¿Se extiende y se flexiona o cómo?
Sí, extender el brazo queda
Sí.
recto. Si lo flexiono, lo doblo. That's
Ok, muy
what I
bien.
tend to use in real life instead of telling somebody que flexiona el brazo, le digo que lo doblen.
Okay. Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
And heart disease, Terry?
Oh, I can't talk. Enfermedad cardíaca.
Okay, and the verb to suffer, David?
Padecer o tener una enfermedad crónica. Yeah.
Aplicado generalmente a una enfermedad crónica. Esa traducción de la palabra. Okay.
Aplicado.
We had said that if it was something that happens all of a sudden, entonces we could say sufrió un ataque al corazón.
Ah, sí, sí.
Okay. Infectious disease, Terry, is...
Enfermedad infecciosa.
Okay, and typhoid, David?
Fiebre tifoidea.
Okay, and cholera, Terry?
La cólera.
Okay, and diphtheria?
Difteria.
And tetanus?
Tétanos.
And measles?
Sarampión.
And the memory aid was?
Sarah had measles, yes.
Yeah, sarampión.
Eso nunca me olvidaré.
This is a disease we don't see anymore because of the widespread vaccination against this disease, which is smallpox.
Viruela.
Yes, I have a nice scar because I was vaccinated against this disease.
Me too.
They don't vaccinate against it anymore.
I was vaccinated when I was going to go to Costa Rica for the first time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it leaves a nice scar.
Yeah.
No sé quién seguía. Atención médica.
Medical care.
Okay. Common childhood illnesses.
Enfermedades comunes de la niñez.
Okay. You know, there's a dictionary I use, which is el doctor Fernando Navarro. He recommends just simplifying this and saying enfermedades de la infancia.
Okay.
Okay. And understanding that they are common because all kids get them.
Okay.
So he simplifies that. Chickenpox era, David?
Varicela.
You may hear, I haven't heard anybody say this, but it's in this book, viruela loca. For chickenpox.
I have crazy smallpox. They went crazy.
Yeah.
Varicela. No, wait a minute. Okay, varicela was the chickenpox. Okay,
Yes.
got it. So how do you say shingles?
Culebrilla.
Culebrilla. Okay.
The problem is that not everybody understands that word, even though it is, used. I interpret that today for a gentleman. They were asking him if he wanted because there is a vaccine for
Single shot. Yep.
Yeah. So I generally say culebrilla and I say shingles. The medical term is herpes zoster. But eso lo van a entender todavía menos. So I'll just say the word in English and say culebrilla, and if they don't understand, there's just nothing I can really do. So I don't really have a word for it, and a better one.
Right. Well, that helps, though.
And mumps era?
Paperas.
Paperas, ¿no?
Paperas.
Paperas.
Okay. And matriz, I interpret it here as womb, to use a different word from uterus, but it is uterus as you have interpreted, Terry.
Okay,
that's fine.
Yes, thank you.
El apéndice, David?
Appendix.
And if you're hospitalized, Terry?
Le internan a uno, ¿verdad?
Sí, puede estar internado o
hospitalizado.
Okay. A drug in the context used here, David?
Medicamento, fármaco.
Okay. Fármaco es una palabra un poco más delicada, más elevada de su registro y a veces más utilizada entre profesionales hablando de ciertos ensayos clínicos de algún medicamento nuevo, ¿no? Un fármaco que están.
Sí, sí.
Okay.
Fármaco.
And jaqueca, Terry?
A bad headache or a migraine.
Okay. That is true. I would, keep it as migraine for the test, right?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
I love that word.
Yeah, jaqueca. In real life, most people have already picked up, and most countries too, they just say migraña, and it is in medical books. But the old, Spanish was jaqueca. Yeah, sounds really bad. Tengo una
It sounds like what it is. I'm a jaqueca, give me a break.
And David, the chest X-ray.
Eso es radiografía del tórax.
Okay. El tórax es la parte del cuerpo que queda debajo del cuello y arriba de la cintura y sin incluir los brazos. Okay. Todo eso es el tórax. Un chequeo.
A checkup.
Okay. Heart palpitations.
Palpitaciones.
If I've got chest pain, tengo.
Dolor del pecho.
If I'm having shortness of breath.
Dificultad para respirar.
Okay.
If falta de aire.
Yeah,
you also said, right?
Yes. A gown es una.
Bata.
The examining table.
La camilla. I'm sorry, I keep butting in. I'm so sorry.
No. Es que los dos.
Okay.
La camilla. Cool.
Camilla, mesa de exploraciones. I also want to let you know that camilla is also the name given to the one that wheels around.
It's a gurney. It's a gurney, right?
Okay.
Or a stretcher.
Yes. But camilla in Spanish can go either way. It can be the one that, they move patients in, or it's just the one that's in the examining room. Either way is okay. And canilla, as was used here.
Forearm.
Okay, and might mean also shin. And I've also I've had patients from Mexico using canilla as wrist. So it's that's one of those type of words that I have to ask. I have to ask them, what do you mean by?
Yeah.
Because it could be a lot of different things. A couple of related terms I just want to add here. El chamorro is a colloquial term for the calf, pantorrilla, in Spanish. El chamorro. Get people from Mexico using this word. Also, people from Mexico using piocha for chin. Okay.
Wow.
Piocha.
I've never heard that before. They both sound like something to eat.
I'm getting hungry. And as I mentioned earlier, mano y pie could mean any part of the arm or any part of the leg. So these tend to be terms that at times either we're going to say hand/arm or foot/leg, or have to ask the patient what part of the body they are referring to, or if they could signal what part of the body. Sometimes they're nervous or just lacking a word, and it's hard to be in front of a doctor, and we try to help them out all we can.
Sure.
Yeah, anxiety hits.
So I don't know if you have any questions. If there are no questions, that's
I have
all
one
I've
really.
got for you.
Okay,
Yes.
I have just one quick question. Today it came up, and I had to kind of define it as opposed to really knowing what it was because I was in the middle of interpreting.
That's what I usually do.
Wheezing. They said, do you have wheezing? And I would say, bueno, tienes síntomas como de la asma, con dificultad para respirar.
Sí.
But I don't really know how to say it.
Okay. The medical term, which may not be of that much use in real life, is sibilancias. It's a musical quality
whistling,
to a whistling. So, le chilla el pecho, le silba el pecho cuando está respirando. I would say something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. ¿Alguna otra preguntita?
Para mí no.
Gracias, Marcelo.
Okay.
Muchas gracias.